Hi, friends. Welcome to another talk. Hello from Wildlife World Photographers channel. I'm your moderator, Yetmir Troshani from Albania, currently talking from New York here. And today with me is Georgina Steytler from Albany, Western Australia. Same as our buddy Nathan Watson, who actually referred Georgina to me to do this interview, and she so graciously accepted. So I'd like to give a shout out to our buddy Nathan, a very cool guy and a wonderful photographer who often participate in our Facebook group. I can't wait to present some of Georgina's breathtaking images, and through them we'll get to know her artistry behind the camera. But before we do that, let's ask, who is Georgina Steytler? Please tell us a little bit about yourself.
I should say, I mean, this is the hardest question of all. I'm just a person who loves nature and photography. I've always loved photography. So nature and photography became a natural fit. And it's just taken off. I used to be a lawyer. So I had a massive career change. And it's so funny how often you meet photographers who had other professions in professional life, and Andy Rouse and people like that. And then we've kind of gone into photography at some stage because at the end of the day, that's where your heart goes. And also the corporate world is quite a stressful world, and nature is very therapeutic for the soul.
Yep, nature is calling us all.
It is. It's meditative. It's just
absolutely.
you know.
Yeah,
who wants to be in a corporate office?
So let's go ahead and share your amazing images. By the way, this will be a very unique interview, guys. The images you'll see, and we are very lucky to have Georgina to tell us the story behind it. So,
go on.
Yep. Start with this first one here. Awesome.
I just wanted to start with saying I did put in a very eclectic group of images, but I think each image actually sums up a bit of my personality, so that my style is a little bit all over the place. But at the end of the day, I love personality in birds, and I love behavior shots. So I look for shots like this. The emus were feeding. It happens actually very quickly. So one of my favorite things is to say to people is spray and pray, which is continuous high-speed shutter mode. And you don't actually see this with the eye. It happens so quickly. So to freeze that moment, you really have to take a lot of images to get that one moment where that little berry, and for me, it characterizes Australia as well. It's an iconic bird. And then this huge bird eating this ridiculously small berry. I love it.
Such an amazing moment. Here's another very, very fantastic shot. Tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, and this is a very North American shot probably, because I put this in because I don't always do it, but I can take those sharp, kind of standard shots with and this is probably the best one I've got because I was actually very close to this bird. So there's not a lot of crop on this image, and everything just worked perfectly. It's just snapping that moment, the beautiful background, getting low, the beautiful light of the morning. It all just came together. And again, spray and pray. Go out in nice light, go where the birds are, and just be patient, and it will happen.
What's your gear, by the way?
Oh, so this was shot with a Canon 1DX Mark II, I think, and probably a 600mm lens, and it would have probably had a teleconverter. It might have been my 1.4. I've since run over my 1.4. I've actually destroyed 3 1.4 converters because I keep putting them on the bonnet of the car and saying to myself, this time I'm not going to forget, and then I forget and I drive off. This is probably with my dearly, and I've got a 600mm f4 lens, so it's a big, heavy prime lens, but my goodness, it's beautiful.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Here's another moment. Indeed, you brought
So
us
actually,
different shots, and thank you for doing that, so we can see all the range of, you know, and what's amazing about this photography.
yeah, and you know what happened with this image is actually went there to take bird photos. It was a hot summer's day in the morning, and this is the only water remaining in a very dry area, so you get a lot of wildlife around. And then I noticed these mud wasps, and of course I did all the techniques that I use for bird photography, and the only thing I did differently was that I pre-focused on the mud wasp on the soil, if you can see on the right hand side, and I saw that they would come back and forth carrying those little balls. So I pre-focused on him, and then I basically did the spray and pray, continuous high-speed shutter mode, as the one came flying through. I used a higher f-stop, maybe f8 or f11 or something, to try and maximize. Because they're small insects, I was using the big 600mm prime lens. I was lying on the ground in the mud. So I was at ground level. I was using all those techniques I use for birds. I just used it for wasps, but it's much harder to track little insects through the lens, a big lens like that, than it is a bird, which is a lot bigger. But one of the main reasons I also put this in is because this was one of my images that was in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year, and I noticed that you interviewed Marcel van Oosten.
Correct. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Yes.
I've met him, and I have the most embarrassing story ever. I thought you would like it.
Tell us if you can tell us. That's very.
I can tell you. It's embarrassing for me because I was at the Wildlife Photography of the Year Awards, and you know, being in London Natural History Museum, it's just all overwhelming, right? It's just totally overwhelming. And I actually won the invertebrates category, behaviour category, with this image. So I was flown to London, and I think winners are all put up in the same hotel. And so the night was all a bit of a blur. And then next morning we were at breakfast in this hotel. And as we were walking out of the breakfast area, this guy goes to me, "Oh, congratulations on your, you know, on your winning image." And I turned around and I said, "Oh," I said, "Were you there?" And then I realized.
It was Marcel. That's so cool.
And I know, and I just thought I was so embarrassed afterwards because I realized, I thought, oh my God, he won the whole thing, and there I am saying, "Oh, were you there?" But I'm going to tell you that he's a really lovely guy, and him and his wife are both drop dead gorgeous, and they were such lovely people.
Right.
And that's one of the reasons. I think you said you think he's one of the best photographers in the world. I've got to agree. His artistic style is just beyond.
Yeah. Such a gentleman. He had, by the way, he had a bike accident. I don't know if you saw him on Facebook group, and he was such a sport about that. Also, he was in hospital and he shared that experience. But he was such a good sport. So he's such a gentleman, you know.
He is
behind and in front of the camera. It's such a cool guy.
He's really, really humble, and it's really interesting because he won a category, but he didn't know he was going to win. And he obviously didn't even expect that he would win, because when they announced him as the winner, he had nothing to say.
Yes, so it's tough when you put on the spot.
Wow,
also, you know? I can imagine.
And it's really nice because everybody had prepared speeches, and you think if he had a prepared speech, it would have been like, "Oh, you know, he's expecting it." But he obviously was not expecting it, and it was so nice. It was so nice. And it was
beautiful.
an amazing image.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. I mean, these little experiences really add richness to this conversation. So thanks for doing so.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about this? Wow.
I had to put this in because I mean, people in Australia know, but I have a bit of a love relationship with these little amphibious fish called mud skippers, and I just love them. And they leap out of the air all the time, and it absolutely fascinates me. And they have these arguments, and I've got other photos where the way they argue or fight is to open their mouths at each other. It's one of the most ridiculous little animals in the world. And I go every time I go to this place. It's in Northern Australia, because you only get mud skippers where there are kind of mangroves, tidal mangroves around higher up near the equator, or lower down if you're in the Northern Hemisphere. So so they're only in that band, I think there's some in Africa, maybe in Asia,
Mm.
and Australia. So we're really lucky to have them up there. And when I go there, I just can't wait. I can't wait. Oh, well, I don't care about the birds. We get all these migratory waders. I'm like, screw the birds.
The stuff.
Sorry. Am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
Hey, absolutely.
Can I just say about technique on this? Obviously, it was I wanted to highlight, really, I want those bits of mud flying everywhere because that's what makes it. And I want him fully out of the air. It's very quick to lose focus because they tend to leap in a direction. So you've got to kind of be lucky if you can get the eye in. But the other thing you have to do is, unless you've got one of these cameras, and I've got an Olympus one EM, whatever it is, one of those ones, Mark III, that has Pro Capture. And have you heard about Pro Capture?
I have not.
Oh, okay. So it's like Back to the Future mode. So if you hold the shutter down halfway, it is recording what it's seeing. And then what happens is, say if you've got a bird on the branch or on a mudskipper, you don't know when he's going to jump. And if you wait till you see him jumping, you will actually miss this shot because it happens so quickly that we don't have enough reaction time. So you've got to press the shutter before they jump. Pro Capture mode, you can keep recording on the mudskipper, and then once you see him jump, you can press the shutter all the way down, and then it records the 16 or something or 15 previous images that it was recording on the camera. It writes them to the card, and it captures all the movement that you wanted, like in the few seconds before you actually push the shutter. It's a little bit hard to get your head around, but otherwise, I actually did this with the Canon though, a digital SLR, and it required me to press the shutter before they jumped. So I had to understand the behavior and take a risk, and I took thousands of photos to get a photo like this.
I'm sure there's going to be one of those interviews that I'm going to go back and revisit for many reasons. So it's just, thank you for sharing.
I hope that's a good thing.
It's great. So here's another person.
Edit out, edit. Okay, so this one won the creative category of the Bird Photographer of the Year competition. And I put it in creative because I love to get those black backgrounds, I call them backgrounds, where you use the light differential between the bird and the background. But in this case, the background wasn't quite completely dark. So I did actually darken it more in Lightroom or Adobe Photoshop. And so I put it in the creative category because I thought it went from having some detail in the background to being completely black. So I thought it probably crossed the line into creative. But essentially the photo is what there was there, in the sense that there was that duck, he was preening. It's actually called the speculum, those feathers where you have that iridescent patch of feathers on the wings of water birds and things. Speculum is also the name of another terrible, terrible medical instrument, but we won't talk about it.
Okay.
Look, Google it later, but women don't like it, basically. And anyway, I really loved it. The funny thing is I went to this lake thinking, oh, I made that classic mistake of going, oh, it's just a Pacific black duck, which are an extremely common bird in Australia, like they're everywhere. But it's a bit like the mallards, I suppose. And it just goes to show that you can make a beautiful image out of any bird. And what happened is he started preening. I saw the reflection of the speculum. The bird was in a bit of light. It was mostly dark behind. And I just saw that this could be a beautiful image. And I think it's just that color as well, the turquoise, the blues, the greens. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah, it's definitely breathtaking. It just, I mean, I'm looking at it and I cannot stop looking at it. So I'm kind of like finding myself, my divided attention between you speaking and it's merging beautifully and me looking at the bird. So that's amazing.
And there's another thing, it reminds me of this quote by Vincent Munier. I'm going to always get it wrong. And I don't know if he got it from someone else, but he said, I live in a world of imagination. And when you reveal everything, your imagination. And I think it's so true. It's something like that. I've said it badly. But what he's saying, a lot of the time we see a lot of literal photos, bird on branch photos. And the problem, they're great, but the problem is they're not evoking the mind any further than it's quite a literal interpretation of the bird. When you have something like this, we're looking at it. And the thing is, we can't see the head of the bird, anything that we normally see. But at the same time, we know exactly what we're looking at. And that's because our brain is filling in the gaps in the background. And that must subconsciously is why these kind of images where it's not literal, but at the same time, we're still filling the gaps, probably are getting a bigger response from the viewer than a literal image. A literal image, you see it, you like it, you move on, and you often don't think of it again. And I'm fascinated by how our brains work and that there are things going on in the background that we don't realize. And there are general rules about those things as well.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that for many of us, that's what makes the journey very rich and interesting, and what kind of makes us glued to this passion. Because the journey is so long to this intricates that you are sharing. So it's so cool. Okay, all right, here is another take. Yeah.
So this one I took from a cliff and overlooking an inlet. And so I always wanted to get it. I had this idea of having a shot for many years of birds walking in the clouds like they're in the sky. And I just had the perfect opportunity. I went back several days, and then on this day there was a bit of cloud, so the sunset was really amazing. So you got this beautiful colours of all the clouds. And I had been shooting with the 600mm lens, and as soon as I saw what was about to happen, I switched over to the 100 to 400 zoom lens, and I zoomed out. I think it was shot at about 200mm. I increased the depth of field because I wanted to make sure that I was looking down at the water at an angle, and I wanted to make sure that I had as much detail in the clouds as possible. Like I didn't want them to blur out. I wanted it to feel like they were in the sky. And it was very late, so it was quite a high ISO, but I really like that feeling of birds in the environment where you're kind of not even really sure, you know, entirely what you're looking at. Like some people are looking for the line, the water line, the horizon line, but there isn't one because everything you're looking at is water. It's a reflection. So at no point are you actually looking at the sky, and sometimes that can be a bit hard to. And the other interesting thing about this picture is if you flip it, it looks exactly the same. You can't. The only thing you can tell the difference is there's a little shadow underneath the bird. You can see a dark patch. But, anyway.
Very cool.
I go around flipping photos.
That's another minimalistic approach, if you will.
Yeah, and I am drawn to minimalism as well. Again, I would say that I didn't necessarily put in my best photos, but I wanted to showcase a variety of things that appeal to me. And this was just like when you get a grey, cloudy morning and it was perfectly still, shallow water, so there was a good reflection and these birds. So I haven't edited anything out of this shot, and I just cropped out. There's a couple of rocks over on the left, which I've cropped out. But that's as it is, and I love that feeling of this little bird. I could have zoomed right in, but the thing is you would have lost a bit of that feeling of the bird in this vast watery landscape. And these little guys fly across the water. I love that. They kind of run really quickly and then they stop and then they run really quickly and they're just adorable. And I if I can, I always prefer to get action over a still shot. So I always have my shutter. I tend to shoot at very high ISOs because I want to freeze action, and I tend to shoot in low light as well. So I'm always using high ISOs, and it's because I want to use low light, but I also want to get fast, sharp action if it happens. That's
awesome. Oh, here is another unique perspective.
I put this in as a bit of fun. So it's not that it's a great image, but it shows you that you can have a bit of fun with photography, and don't think that you can't go outside the box. And I remember I've got this friend who's very literal, like all his images are literal. He's a scientist, he's straight, and he's like, why the hell were you photographing the arse of a birdie?
No, but it's amazing symmetry happen here, and yet very artistic. That makes it very artistic at the same time. Very unique perspective.
I like it. It's a bit of fun.
Very nice.
Again, spray and pray. Never.
Yes. So here's
Oh,
another
this one.
take completely. Yes, backlight,
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah. Oh, this one was one of those occasions where, you know, with the sun setting and you see a bird on a perch and you're like, you've got to try and line them up. And I was actually at a place that's full of saltwater crocodiles. And I don't know if you know about the Australian saltwater crocodiles, but you don't want to get eaten by a crocodile. So you can't actually get out of the car. So what I had to do is I opened the door and I was hanging off the car door, and I had to hang further to try and line up the bird on the perch exactly with where the sun was setting, so that it was right behind it, because I didn't want it to the side, it wouldn't be the same thing. And then again, it was with the Canon, it was a digital SLR, so I sprayed and prayed before he took off. I was just taking photos, because if you wait till he takes off, you won't capture this moment. So you have to literally click the button just before he takes off. Again, if you had that pro capture mode that Olympus had, it would really help.
Yes, a very nice technique. Oh,
Yeah,
how about this
but
guy? Yeah, wow.
I had to put him in because I absolutely love Australian wildlife. I love kangaroos. I am a part-time wildlife carer, so I look after orphan joeys. So they're like my little babies. But to me, I love images that capture the personality of an animal and make him kind of human almost. And you can see him having a bit of a scratch. He's leaning over. I love backlight. Those beautiful wandoo trees in the background have this, and the sun setting behind them. So they've got this beautiful color to them. And then it's highlighting where you don't realize it's dusty. And then all the hair's coming off him as he scratches. So it just had a combination of everything coming together to create what I love, that kind of atmospheric, but also like personality plus image of one of our beautiful animals.
Yeah. Yet again, I mean, the importance of behavior, it's being underlined, emphasized, that it's, and I can see it coming through very strongly, and it really makes an impact. And we had to also talk about your book, which also Nathan mentioned in our conversations and briefly, but please tell us a little bit about those. How did you come to this point?
So it's a combination, I suppose, of 10 years of bird photography, and I wanted to do a book. And I'm a very passionate about ethics in bird photography too, having a low impact. So I wanted to show people that you can take really engaging, beautiful photos without doing invasive things to try and get the image. And I wrote to Australian Geographic, and they were really keen to publish it. I mean, people ask why they should enter competitions, and one of the reasons you should enter competitions is because you end up getting a profile. So because they had seen me enter this nature photography competition that they run, they already knew who I was and they were familiar with my images, and they were happy to publish me. And it's one of those things that people don't often talk about, but it gives you a profile competitions. There's no doubt about it. If you don't enter them, then Instagram is one thing, but there's a lot of people on social media, and it's going to be very hard to stand out from the crowd. Anyway, all the proceeds from this book go to conservation. The first edition has sold out. They're going to republish the hard copy again in July, so I'm very excited. And the best thing is I've used the proceeds. I've got $10,000 from this book, the first edition, that is going towards purchasing a wetland to help in save. Is this wetland that has previously been used as a potato farm, and it's home to 5 breeding pairs of one of our endangered bitterns. So it's an incredible location. So you can make a difference. I mean, this is one of the things I'm passionate about going forward, is using that photography. Once you've got the photography, is using it to make a difference, because our nature needs us, conservation needs us. We don't have time to wait to change the next generation. We need to act now. The biggest thing is habitat destruction. We're losing areas more than we can revegetate. So it really is, everybody could go out there and look for areas near them that they can act to try and protect, mitigate the damage, maybe buy, conserve, anything. We need to do it now.
Such a good message. Me and my friend just came from Kenya, and one interesting fact that I learned is that people will buy land in Kenya only for the purpose of non-disturbance, buying the land and just leaving it. And then
Yeah.
the animals will just flock it so naturally. And I was amazed to hear that. And then you also mentioned the idea of purchasing a certain habitat where it can later, it's such a good cause, it really does make a difference. So let's come back. Well, today's interview was a real joy, and thank you so much for being part of this. Any last thoughts you wanna leave us with?
Oh no, only what I was just saying, that I think that if we as bird photographers love birds or love nature, I think now's the time we have to do more. It's not enough, I'm afraid to say, to just post pretty pictures. It's not enough anymore. We've really got to get out there. And one of the things I took from those Wildlife Photographer of the Year awards was someone said it. I thought it might have been Franz Lanting, but I'm not sure. I can't say for certain, but they got up. It was a prominent photographer, and he said it's time photographers got out from behind the lens and started standing in front of it. And that's so true, and it's so important. Yeah.
And I'd like to share with you very briefly a type of an initiative that we are involved. We have created a group and of course a website and an Instagram, of course, to keep people engaged. But the really goal and hope is to create a community engagement of wildlife photographers around the world in such a way that we can learn from one another, visit these places, take these shots, make the difference, and essentially really bring forth exactly what you're bringing, what you're saying. So I'm just so glad you're looking at it from this perspective with respect, and you said it well. Let's move forward from behind the camera, in front of the camera, and make a difference. But I think this interview also aims in some level to not simply talk about the photography, but also what can we do through photography. I think that's something that really also today came through very strongly. So I thank you for that.
You're welcome. Well, thank you. And I've kept to the time limit, have I?
You are amazing. Thank you. Thank you. It was great. Thank you so much. We'll stay in touch.
All right. Thank you
Okay.
for having me. Bye.